Hello friends, I am glad to see you again. Today I will tell you about the homeowners association that built a fence. I didn't buy a place on Cedar Glass Lake to start trouble, but trouble found me anyway. And oh boy, did it pick the wrong driveway to pull into. Picture sunrise lights skipping across perfectly still water, a heron lifting off the reeds, and me, coffee in hand, grinning at 3 generations of a dream finally cashed in. My grandparents scraped coins for decades so there'd be a little inheritance. My mom chipped in her retirement check, and I front-loaded every overtime shift the paramedic schedule would sell me. Last March, I closed on a modest A-frame with 51 feet of natural shoreline, exactly 2 feet beyond the minimum for a dock permit according to state code. 3 months later, I woke up to the thwack-thwack of post drivers hammering right between my lilacs and my lateral property marker. By the time I pulled on sneakers, a crew in orange vests had already unrolled 8-foot cedar panels clear across my lake access. The new wall ran from my neighbor's barbecue pit on the left all the way to the public trail easement on the right, sealing my slice of water behind a fresh-stained barricade like I'd never owned it. "Morning," yelled the foreman, wiping sweat. "HOA project, should be done by lunch." "I'm not in the HOA," I said, voice half sleep, half disbelief. "Take it up with the board," he shrugged, then stapled a bright yellow notice to the final post. Rule 17. Lake access is a members-only amenity. Join or stay landlocked. I had never even heard of an HOA inside the Lake District. Turns out the cottages across the street organized one last winter, specifically 92 homes across the road, none of which possessed so much as a puddle in their backyard. They didn't own the shoreline. They just outvoted inertia and declared the water a shared amenity, managed by their shiny new association, Lakeside Serenity Neighbors. Their president, a man named Collis, rang my bell that evening. Collis wore boat shoes without socks and flipped a leather portfolio open like a magician producing a rabbit. "We're offering you a warm path to membership," he said, sliding a contract under my nose. "Initiation fees $2,000, annual dues $850, dock fee $350. Sign here and the gate code is yours." "I have a recorded deed granting riparian rights," I answered, pointing at the lake beyond the fence. "Sure, but community standards evolve," Collis replied with a smile so practiced it squeaked. "You'll come around. Everybody does. By the way, the board voted to schedule kayak inspections next month. Non-members can't store watercraft on shore, so you'll need to remove that aluminum canoe before the compliance officer tags it. Have a blessed one." He left with a wave, apparently satisfied that I would fold like a cheap patio chair. That was his first mistake. His second mistake was not noticing the small brass plaque bolted to a rock behind my hydrangeas. It marked the edge of a 30-foot ingress-egress easement, granted in 1963 so the parcel behind me could wheel a fishing cart down to the lake. That parcel was now abandoned woodland, but the easement never expired. Under state law, blocking it was a violation punishable by mandatory removal plus triple damages for interference with recorded access. A tidy statute I knew well, because during paramedic downtime I study real estate case law the way some folks do crosswords. I called the county surveyor's office, ordered certified plats, and hired a drone photographer to map the fence line. While I waited for paperwork, I went full petty. Every morning at 6 a.m., I brewed the strongest espresso my machine could grind, stepped outside in bedroom slippers, and sat in a lawn chair inches from the barricade, tilting the mug so aromatic steam wafted over. The cedar panels smelled nice. The simmering silence smelled nicer. On day 4, Collis and 2 board members marched into my yard without knocking. "We're issuing a formal notice," he announced, producing a carbon copy pad. "You are in violation for harboring an unauthorized structure," he pointed at my lawn chair, "and for conducting non-approved photography over the lake," he meant the drone. "My chair and my airspace are outside your jurisdiction," I said, then snapped a photo of them standing inside my posted property lines. "But trespassing is definitely inside the sheriff's." They backed off, but the next week I received a certified letter threatening daily fines of $100, lien placement, and potential foreclosure proceedings if I didn't join Serenity Neighbors. That was comedy gold, because only a legally constituted HOA with recorded covenants in my chain of title can slap liens. Their articles stopped at the edge of their street. Their lawyer had apparently neglected to mention that property rights are not contagious like head colds. Time to escalate. First, I filed a complaint with the county code office citing unlawful obstruction of a platted easement. Second, I petitioned the court for a temporary injunction forcing removal of the fence pending adjudication. Third, and this part felt delicious, I bought a one-day guest pass to the big outdoor expo downtown and rented a 16-foot flatbed trailer. I rolled home with a gleaming, fully enclosed portable toilet, bright blue and unmistakable. Using a garden wagon, I jockeyed it right against the fence so the door opened toward the HOA's street, then slapped on a laminated sign, Future Serenity Neighbors Clubhouse, free tours. I might have gone overboard, but I still hadn't reached the lake. 2 days before the injunction hearing, a county inspector arrived, clipboard in hand. He clocked the porta-john, raised an eyebrow, then measured distances from the fence to the recorded easement markers. His final tape tug landed square in the middle of the cedar paneling. He stuck a neon sticker labeled "Violation," "Remove," and left without saying a word. Collis showed up an hour later, veins popping beneath his sunscreen. "Do you realize what kind of fines you're going to saddle the association with?" he hissed. "Not my circus." I gestured at the sticker. "But if you want to avoid triple damages, you should grab a Sawzall." He sputtered something about spirit of community and stalked off. That evening, the HOA held an emergency meeting. I know because their bylaws required yard signs announcing it, which they planted right alongside the porta-john, effectively pointing their own membership toward the source of a gentle sewage funk. The irony was thick enough to trowel. I spent the meeting hour drafting a casual email to the local news tip line. Subject: Tiny HOA tries to steal lake, gets potty trained. I attached drone footage of the fence bisecting the shoreline and linked the public deed showing my riparian rights. Journalists love simple villains. By sunrise, a reporter named Zara was on my porch. She filmed an interview with me standing in front of the locked gate, my canoe tilted sadly behind us. Collis declined her calls, but she scored video of him speed walking to his SUV, briefcase shielding his face. The segment aired that evening on the 6 o'clock broadcast, right after the weather. My phone lit up with texts from neighbors I'd never met. "You're a legend," one read. "Need backup? I own bolt cutters." The HOA doubled down instead. They hired a law firm, Freiberg and Knight, to file a countersuit alleging nuisance, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress via hazardous odors. Apparently, the porta-john's pine-scented deodorizer qualified as a bioweapon in their book. My attorney, a laconic woman named Vespa, almost laughed the first time we met. "They bought a Cadillac and filled it with raccoons," she said. "Let's drive it straight to the judge." Hearing day arrived like Christmas morning. Collis, 3 board members, and 2 attorneys filled one side of the courtroom. I sat alone with Vespa and a thick binder. The judge, a silver-haired man with half-moon glasses, opened with the injunction request. Vespa displayed the plat, easement grant, deed language, and the county violation notice. "Mr. Collis," the judge asked, "do you dispute that the fence blocks a recorded ingress-egress easement?" Freiberg cleared his throat. "Your Honor, we believe the community's right to regulate shared amenities supersedes the county recorder and decades of property law," the judge interrupted. "No, remove the fence within 10 days. Collis's shoulders sagged. Then came the countersuit. The judge skimmed it, expression drifting from curious to annoyed. "Odor-based emotional distress from a legally permitted portable toilet?" he read aloud, incredulous. "Counsel, is this satire?" The gallery chuckled. The judge dismissed their claim, ordered the HOA to pay my legal fees, and reminded them that filing frivolous lawsuits could invite sanctions under Rule 11. Court adjourned. The story should have ended there. It didn't, because Collis decided to move the goalposts. That very night, while I slept, someone unscrewed the porta-john's vent pipe cap and dumped a gallon of fish guts down the seat. The next morning, a rancid reek rolled over the neighborhood. The service company tagged the unit unsafe, sealed the door, and left an invoice for specialized cleaning. Over $600. Conveniently, the HOA's brand new security camera across the street lost power between midnight and 2 a.m. Gosh, wonder why. I filed a police report. Without footage, the deputy couldn't pin it. But I had another play. See, dumping biological waste outside designated facilities violates both county health code and state environmental regulations. Penalties escalate if the contamination reaches navigable water. And guess what sits downhill? Lake water samples aren't hard to collect if you own, well, temporarily lack access to, but still own, shoreline. I spent Saturday morning filling sterile vials at 3 shoreline points, 2 on my lot, 1 at the public launch 50 yards away. I overnighted them to a lab that specializes in E. coli testing for beach advisories. Meanwhile, I drove to the county environmental health office, turning in a packet, sworn statement, photos, and the discarded cap covered in fish scales I'd salvaged with gloves. The inspector scheduled a site visit for Monday. The lab emailed results Sunday. The sample nearest the fence showed E. coli levels triple the state recreational threshold. I forwarded the report to the inspector in Vespa. Monday afternoon, she filed a civil complaint and copied the district attorney. When the inspector arrived, he spotted the unsecured vent, sniffed once, and made a face like he'd bitten a lemon. He took more water samples and slapped a red notice on the fence. Public health hazard. Area closed pending remediation. He also served Collis, who happened to be power walking laps in a polo shirt, with a subpoena to testify at the DA's inquiry. That night, the lakefront homes, including mine, were cordoned off with caution tape. Every member of Serenity Neighbors received an email from their board. Out of an abundance of caution, the lake is temporarily closed. Please refrain from all water activities. Thank you for your community spirit. Their next email announced an emergency assessment. Each household owed $400 for environmental cleanup, plus a temporary dues hike to replenish the legal defense fund. The torch and pitchfork phase began. One by one, neighbors in golf carts trundled to my yard, apologizing for the inconvenience and swearing they never voted for the fence. Mrs. Doreen, an 82-year-old with a rescue chihuahua, slipped me fresh-baked snickerdoodles. She said Collis pushed everything through while most members ignored the fine print. We just wanted holiday lights rules, she sighed. By Thursday, rumors swirled that Collis's own dock, conveniently built 2 years before the HOA existed, violated the same shoreline setback he'd cited against me. Petitions circulated to recall the board. I watched through binoculars as residents knocked on doors, clipboard in hand. Friday morning, work trucks rolled up. Contractors and respirators removed the cedar panels piece by piece and loaded them onto flatbeds. They lifted my canoe over the debris like a sacred relic. The inspector signed off once the fence was gone, but the lake remained closed until follow-up tests cleared it. Collis vanished, literally. A U-Haul showed up Saturday. By dusk, his house was dark and Zillow had a fresh listing. Lakeview cul-de-sac gem, motivated seller. Word spread that he'd resigned by email, citing toxic hostility toward volunteer leadership. No farewell parties were thrown. The new interim board president, a soft-spoken engineer named Morley, rang my doorbell Sunday afternoon. "We voted unanimously to offer you a settlement," he said. "Full reimbursement for every expense, plus a written apology, plus 3 years of prepaid shoreline maintenance if you'll sign a mutual non-disparagement." I considered. "No gag clauses," I said, "but I'll accept reimbursement, an apology, and a public statement at the next meeting acknowledging property owners' rights." Morley nodded. "Fair?" We shook hands. The next week my check arrived. Legal fees, drone hire, portable toilet rental, lab tests, court costs. A comma in the total made me grin. The apology letter, signed by 9 board members, was printed in the association newsletter and taped to the community bulletin board beneath the headline, "We were wrong." 2 weeks later, water tests showed safe levels. The county inspector lifted the closure, and I hosted a dock rebuilding party. Dozens of neighbors showed up with tool belts and coolers. We sanded, sealed, and launched my canoe to cheers. Mrs. Doreen cut the ribbon with pruning shears. As a final flourish, someone hung the reclaimed cedar gate on 2 posts at the trailhead, where it now serves as a free little library stocked with mystery novels. Then came the tax assessment, the kind that lands on your doorstep like a vulture and starts sharpening its beak on the welcome mat. One crisp Tuesday in October, I opened a plain manila envelope from the county assessor's office and nearly choked on my oatmeal. They jacked my fair market value by a full 83% over last year. My modest A-frame, which I'd bought for a hair under $350, was suddenly worth $643,000 and change, at least according to a spreadsheet wielded by someone who'd clearly never priced roof shingles in their life. My projected property tax bill ballooned by more than my monthly mortgage. No explanation, no comparable sales data, just a cheery note. Contact our office within 30 days if you wish to appeal. I called the assessor's public hotline and spent 42 minutes on hold, listening to smooth jazz before a clerk finally confirmed the number was correct. New amenities and neighborhood desirability upgrades were recorded, she said, sounding as bored as a DMV camera. Amenities? The only new thing on my lot was the free little library. And unless tourists were flying in to read secondhand paperbacks, something smelled fishier than the Porta John incident. Morley stopped by that evening for what should have been a routine shoreline maintenance inspection, clipboard in hand, reflective vest like we were running a nuclear plant. When I waved the assessment under his nose, he looked genuinely puzzled. The board had nothing to do with county valuations, he insisted. We did file the completion certificate for the cleanup, but that's required by environmental code. His brows knit. Everybody else on the street only saw modest bumps, 3, maybe 4%. He scrolled through emails on his phone and frowned harder. Except you. 2 sleepless nights later, I submitted a public records request for every document tying Serenity neighbors to the assessor's office. Most counties call it FOIA. Our clerk calls it Sunshine, a week, and $137.25 photocopy fee. Later, I possessed a thumb drive full of PDFs. Buried in a folder labeled Community Outreach sat an email thread between Collis, yes, our absentee ex-president, and a deputy assessor named Cameron Flint. Collis attached drone shots of my freshly rebuilt dock, highlighted in bright yellow with the note, "Significant waterfront enhancement. Owner has effectively increased usable square footage. Also, rumor of short-term rental plans. Keep valuation aggressive so they can't dodge fair share." Flint replied, "Happy to oblige. Always room in the roll for proactive numbers." Collis, it seemed, was still pulling wires from offstage. Meanwhile, I received a glossy postcard from Sunridge Ventures, a developer I'd never heard of, offering to relieve me of the burden of escalating taxes in exchange for a quick, close cash sale, price to be discussed after walkthrough. My gut screamed setup. 2 days later, a neighbor named Levon knocked at dusk, clutching a dog-eared HOA newsletter. "They floated a proposal at last night's meeting," he whispered, glancing over his shoulder. "New community marina. Need additional shoreline to get the permit. Guess whose lot they name-checked?" The dots connected in neon. Collis boosts my tax to squeeze me. A shadow developer slides in with a lifeboat offer. The HOA widens its beachhead once I fold. Classic squeeze and buy. They'd underestimated my capacity for spite and for late-night legal research. Remember the abandoned parcel behind my house? The one that still enjoyed an untouched ingress-egress easement through my yard? Turns out it had fallen delinquent on taxes for 7 years and was headed for auction. Minimum bid, $2,800. I attended the county sale wearing a ball cap and sunglasses like a bad disguise, raised my bidder paddle exactly once, and walked away owning 3.4 wooded acres that everyone else had written off as too swampy for development. To me, it was leverage incarnate, control of both the upstream water flow and the only legal cart path any future marina would need. Step 2. I called the State Land Trust Federation and asked how to place the new parcel into a conservation easement. The coordinator, thrilled by words like riparian buffer and public pollinator corridor, mailed a packet thicker than my arm. Under state code, a permanent conservation easement earns property tax credits, sometimes reimbursements, because you're preserving wildlife habitat. Even better, once filed, it forces adjacent developments to conduct impact studies that make permitting a bureaucratic bog. While the paperwork marinated, I lodged a formal appeal of my assessment. The hearing resembled small claims court. Fluorescent lights, folding tables, 3 panelists who looked like they graded homework for fun. Cameron Flint represented the assessor's side, slick in a charcoal suit. I laid out comparable sales, photographs, and a timeline proving amenities were communal, not private. Then Vespa, who attended pro bono because she'd developed a personal allergy to Collis's name, introduced the email thread, submitting it under seal with profanity redacted. Flint's face drained 4 shades paler. Panel chairperson Dr. Halberd peered over bifocals. "Mr. Flint, can you explain why an email from a private homeowners association officer appears to have directly influenced your valuation methodology?" Flint stammered something about citizen tips, but Halberd cut him off. "Tips aren't standards. We follow uniform standards of professional appraisal practice, not gossip." 10 minutes later, the panel voted unanimously to roll my valuation back to market median and flag Flint's conduct for the county ethics board. 3 days after that, Sunridge Ventures' postcard campaign vanished like a bad odor in a high wind. Neighbors reported seeing a realtor's SUV idling at the cul-de-sac, then speeding away when someone snapped photos. Gossip said their business model relied on soft option contracts tied to Collis's inside information. With Collis gone and Flint under investigation, their battery died. But the real fireworks ignited at the next Serenity Neighbors quarterly meeting. I attended out of morbid curiosity, sitting in the back row beside Mrs. Doreen, who wielded her chihuahua like a furry truth detector. Morley opened with routine committee updates, then yielded the floor to Sergeant Kelly from the county sheriff's office. Kelly announced that an environmental delinquency misdemeanor had been filed against an unnamed individual formerly associated with this association. Everyone knew he meant Collis. Maximum penalty, 18 months of supervised community service plus restitution. The hush in that community hall felt air conditioner cold. Then Morley dropped the haymaker. The board had received notice that their insurer, fed up with lawsuit risk, was tripling their directors' and officers' premium unless procedural safeguards were added. The premium hike meant dues would soar again. Groans rippled across folding chairs. Someone shouted, "Motion to dissolve." Another shouted, "Second." The parliamentarian, a retired civics teacher named Baird, reminded them they needed 80% approval, but the room looked ready to hit 99. I hadn't planned to speak, but Baird dragged me up front as subject matter resource. I cleared my throat and explained that an HOA wasn't mandatory for any parcel on the lake unless covenants were in the recorded deed, and most deeds, including mine, had none. You can disband, I concluded, keep a volunteer neighborhood association for social events, and stop trying to be City Hall. The vote passed 117-2. Serenity Neighbors, the legal entity, died that night, replaced by a loose social club called Lakeside Block Party Crew, whose bylaws fit on a postcard. No jerks, no politics, bring snacks. Ethics investigators wrapped up 2 weeks later. Cameron Flint resigned rather than face disciplinary hearings. The county issued a statement affirming that all valuations he had touched in the last fiscal year were under review. Homeowners queued around the courthouse for refunds like it was Black Friday, and they were giving away big-screen TVs. News crews filmed the line. Zara, my favorite reporter, winked when she saw me and asked if I planned any more lake adventures. I told her I was taking a vacation from drama. Collis couldn't dodge so easily. The DA accepted a plea agreement. He pled to misdemeanor environmental tampering, paid a 5-figure fine, and agreed to 600 hours of community service, specifically shoreline trash pickup under the Adopt a Waterway program. I learned this from a letter the DA mailed to victims. The schedule listed cleanup dates. I highlighted one on my calendar. That morning, I paddled my canoe along the eastern reed bed and spotted a crew in orange vests combing the shore with grabbers. Collis trudged at the back, plastic bag slung over his shoulder, eyes fixed on the mud. I glided past at a polite distance, raised my insulated coffee mug and called, "Beautiful day for public service, isn't it?" He mumbled something like, "Could be worse," without looking up. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Remember that conservation easement? The state approved it, and with it came a juicy tax credit, not only wiping out my property tax for the year, but leaving a surplus I could carry forward. The irony tasted sweeter than Mrs. Doreen's snickerdoodles. Collis's scheme to bankrupt me had netted more savings than any coupon clipper could dream. As autumn settled, I cleared a meandering footpath through the new woodland parcel, posted a hand-painted sign, "Pollinator Trail, enjoy, leave no trace." Neighborhood kids discovered monarch caterpillars on milkweed stands. Retirees installed a hand-carved bench. Someone left a painted rock that read, "Community isn't forced, it's chosen." One Saturday at dusk, Morley, Baird, Mrs. Doreen, and half a dozen former HOA members gathered on my dock for marshmallows. We watched bats skim mosquitoes and listened to loons calling like distant laughter. Morley raised a root beer bottle. "To the lake staying free." We clinked glass and tin. The water, finally calm, mirrored a sky unscarred by fences or floodlights. I figured that was the final chapter, but life likes epilogues. A month later, the county mailed notice of a public hearing on rezoning 3 parcels across the street, including Collis's now vacant house, to multifamily luxury condos. Guess which developer filed the application? Sunridge Ventures, back like a cold sore. They claimed the defunct HOA situation made single-family zoning infeasible. The neighborhood, now galvanized, drafted a protest petition with signatures covering 38 pages. Levon, turns out he's a software engineer, built a website explaining traffic impact, wetlands danger, and loss of heritage trees. I supplied drone footage. Zara did a follow-up story. At the hearing, the Planning Commission voted 7-0 to deny rezoning, citing overwhelming community opposition and environmental concerns tied to the new conservation area. Sunridge's attorney packed up her binders like someone folding a busted card table. Collis's property lingered on the market, price slashed twice, then sold to a retired piano teacher who replaced the manicured lawn with native prairie flowers and installed solar panels. She invited the block crew over for cider. Standing on her deck, I realized the unplanned beauty of the past year. A lake where every shoreline owner now knew the plot of land, the statutes, and, more importantly, each other. That could have been the grand finale, but you know me, I like bow ties on gift boxes. I asked Morley and Baird if they'd help lobby the county to adopt a Community Riparian Stewardship Day. They drafted the resolution. I presented the science. Mrs. Doreen baked cookies for the commissioners. The measure passed unanimously. Guess who has to log his remaining community service hours supervising volunteers on Riparian Day? Collis. Universe has rhythm. So what began as a stubborn fence morphed into dismantling a rogue HOA, dethroning a dirty assessor, bankrupting a predatory developer's plan, and stitching neighbors into genuine friends, all because I refused to pay for lake access I already owned. If you've ever wondered what a government-sanctioned Riparian Stewardship Day looks like, imagine a potluck colliding with an ecosystem lab and a civics class taught on paddleboards. The county printed glossy flyers with a monarch butterfly perched on a cattail, set the date for mid-May, and pledged dumpster service, shoreline testing kits, and enough neon vests to outfit a marching band. They asked me to serve as citizen coordinator, which mostly meant wrangling volunteers, designing a scavenger hunt-style educational walk, and, my favorite perk, choosing the day's playlist. I programmed 6 hours of bluegrass, Motown, and classic rock that never dropped a curse word. Even YouTube would have cleared it for ads. At dawn on event day, a mist clung to the lake like freshly steamed glass. I paddled out to place biodegradable buoys marking the no-wake zone and saw campers already stringing hammocks between birches on the conservation parcel. Morley was at the registration tent unfolding clipboards. Mrs. Doreen, wearing a wide-brimmed hat shaped like a daisy and sporting her chihuahua in a baby sling, passed out homemade raspberry muffins. Levon set up a solar-powered projector so kids could watch macro lens footage of dragonfly nymphs on a bedsheet hung between 2 maples. The scene looked exactly like the community Collis once tried to micromanage with fines and fences. Relaxed, messy, nobody policing lawn chair placement. Speaking of Collis, he arrived at 8 o'clock sharp in the standard-issue orange vest of a community service worker. The county had assigned 3 others, but he alone wore khakis like he still expected to chair a meeting. A supervisor named D, tatted forearms, mirror shades, told him to start up the East Bank with a grabber stick and a 5-gallon bucket. He nodded without complaint, though his eyes darted everywhere but mine. I decided to treat him like any other volunteer. After all, the day was about healing water, not rehashing grudges. The first 2 hours flew. Families collected trash that had probably blown in from highway tailgates decades ago. Soda cans sporting obsolete logos, glass bottles thick with barnacles, a rusted hubcap the size of a wagon wheel. When my phone chimed noon, cueing a switch from Motown to bluegrass, I checked the sign-in sheet. Exactly 212 people had logged hours, beating the county's previous record by 60. Press from 2 local stations milled near the shoreline. One camerawoman balancing on a milk crate to catch a shot of volunteers forming a bucket brigade. Around 12:30, a murmur rippled through the crowd. A kid was missing. Her name was Tansy, 8 years old. Last seen showing off frog eggs to her dad near the inlet. The inlet fringe forms a narrow channel before widening toward the swampy end. If you wander too far, you're hidden by cattails taller than a grown man. I sprinted for the canoe, whistle between my teeth, adrenaline punching my chest like it does on ambulance runs. Dee shouted assignments, search grids, buddy checks like she'd commanded drills all her life. Halfway down the inlet, I heard a splash and a young voice yelp, "I dropped my jar!" A steadier baritone answered, "I've got you. Just hold the branch." I rounded the bend and saw Collis waist-deep in muck, one hand gripping an alder limb, the other propping 8-year-old Tansy, whose sneaker was welded to the mud. Fear flashed in his eyes, not of lawsuits or headlines, but of losing the kid. He mouthed, "Help." I planted the paddle, balanced across the gunnel, and heaved Tansy aboard first. She was soaked yet grinning once her jar of frog eggs was safe. Collis sloshed in after her, boots gurgling, and collapsed on the floorboards while I backstroked us to shore. By the time we touched land, Dee, the community service supervisor, had cleared space. Paramedics, my old crew, checked vitals. Tansy was fine. Collis waved off treatment, but cameras caught every mud-spattered inch of him. When the last trash bag hit the dumpster, I found him on a stump rinsing his watch. I handed over a towel. Could have been worse, he muttered. Yeah, good job, I said. He worried a twig. Running the HOA was supposed to make me indispensable. I bulldozed people instead. That fence haunts me every time I smell cedar. I turned one panel into a bluebird house, I said. He chuckled. If you need muscle, trail work, shoreline repairs, I'm free nights and weekends. He still owed service hours, but the offer felt genuine. We could use a footbridge over the seasonal stream, I told him. Count me in. So the ex-fence builder became foreman of a cedar plank bridge kids christened Tansy Bridge. Flowers sharpied along the rails. Collis logged 35 hours there, 40 more resurfacing the public launch. Midsummer D said he'd finished his required stint plus 60 bonus hours. Showed up off the clock, she shrugged. One July evening, after the final deck screw, Collis handed me a cashier's check for $9,200 and a note. Restitution for everything, porta-john, legal bills, extra taxes, don't argue. Declining would belittle the gesture. I banked it, splitting funds between trail signs and a watershed scholarship. Tansy took second place with a moonlit frog egg watercolor. By fall, the parcel sported a kiosk, pollinator maps, and a guest log stuffed with notes like, "Spotted an otter." Stargazers set telescopes on my dock, teaching newcomers to pronounce Beetlejuice. The county noticed a commissioner nominated our Lakeside Block party crew for the state's Grassroots Gold Award. Morley rented a bus. 40 neighbors plus Mrs. Doreen's Chihuahua rode to the Capitol. Under chandeliers, we heard our tale. One stubborn easement, one illegal fence. A community that dug like beavers and built like them, too. We got a plaque shaped like the state outline. Collis, still mopping park shelters, texted a thumbs-up emoji. The plaque hangs beside the brass marker. Some mornings I pause there, coffee in hand, marveling that a 1963 easement saved an ecosystem in 2025. Time stacks layers. You never know which one you're adding until someone brushes off the moss. Winter iced the dock. I snowshoed the parcel, topped bird feeders, laminated January's water report bragging E. coli counts lowest on record for the kiosk. Late one night I scrolled Dock Talk, our neighbor thread. Sunridge Ventures, now Horizon Nest, was sniffing land 3 miles south. Not our circus, but maybe our blueprint, Morley typed. 30 minutes later, we'd scheduled a free workshop on easements and public comments. 40 future neighbors showed, clipboards ready. Revenge isn't always lightning. Sometimes it's sharing the grounding wire. 1 year after the judge killed the cedar wall, a sapling sprouted where a post once stood. Eastern red cedar, child of the original boards. I replanted it beside Tansy Bridge. If trees gossip, that one will have stories. Maybe someday a newcomer will stroll the pollinator trail and wonder how anyone believed a fence could stall a lake. They'll smell raspberry muffins, hear kids laughing in kayaks, and grasp that property lines are ink. But community is motion, shaped by every hand that refuses to let fear tighten screws too far. I still greet each dawn on the dock, steam curling into sunrise. The shoreline is open, the plaque shines, and if you paddle close, you can read the little library's sign. Take a story, leave a story. If a bully ever barnacles to your deed, remember 3 things. Know your statutes, know your neighbors, and never underestimate the strategic placement of a portable toilet. Friends, thank you. See you soon.